Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the different types of casks that are used for maturing Scotch whiskey and do a review of the Arran Single Malt Scotch Whisky Quarter Cask. So sometimes on the label of a bottle of whiskey, it'll indicate the size of the cask, such as a hogshead or a puncheon, or in this case, a quarter cask. Now, if you saw my review of the Arran Barrel Reserve, the title Barrel Reserve doesn't indicate anything actually about the barrel. Reserve means nothing. It's supposed to, sort of make you think some sort of an extra special, but it doesn't mean it. It has no legal definition, and the fact that they're using a barrel, again, it's like, no duh, of course they're using a barrel. I would recommend changing the name to something else. Now, that's more of an entry-level whiskey, at 43% ABV. This is a big boy's whiskey, a much higher ABV whiskey. But before I get into this, let me tell you about the various types of casks that are used in maturing whiskey. The size and type of the cask has a significant influence on the rate of maturation of a whiskey. The smaller cask, the greater the ratio of spirit to cask wall. A larger cask has less contact between the spirit and wood and consequently slower maturation. Other factors also influence the rate of maturation, including the alcohol by volume in the cask, the climate, and whether the cask is in a dunnage warehouse or a rack house. The following are the 7 most common cask sizes. The smallest being the octave. An octave cask contains only about 1/8 of a butt, about 50 liters. This is where the name octave comes from, because in music, as well as in poetry, octave always has to do with the number 8. Like a quarter cask, there is a lot of interaction between the whiskey and the oak wood in the octave, which means that the malt absorbs a lot of aroma relatively quickly. However, an octave is somewhat rounder in shape than a quarter cask. The second is a quarter cask. Quarter casks are smaller casks in which whiskey often matures to gain more flavor. The smaller the cask, the higher the contact between the spirit and the cask wall, and the more flavors the whiskey can absorb. Quarter can mean either a quarter of a butt, that is 125 liters, or a quarter of an American standard barrel, that is 50 liters. These cask sizes used to be very popular because they made it easier to transport liquids. Today, it is the advantage of faster maturing that makes quarter casks so popular, especially for secondary maturation. The third is a bourbon barrel, also known as an American standard barrel. In the USA, it is a legal requirement for straight bourbon to mature for at least 2 years and fresh casks made of oak. Once these have been used to mature bourbon, they are logically no longer used in American distilleries to produce bourbon. For economical reasons, it has become a standard practice in Scotland to mature whiskey in these used bourbon casks. Typically, such an American standard barrel contains 53 US gallons, which is equivalent to about 200 liters. About 90% of the casks in Scotch warehouses are bourbon barrels. The fourth is the hogshead. Hogsheads are casks made from the staves of other casks. For example, a bourbon barrel with additional staves becomes an American hogshead or bourbon hogshead and holds about 250 liters. Hogsheads are also made from the staves of former sherry casks, which also contain around 250 liters. The hogshead is the most commonly used type of cask. The origin of the name hogshead is widely debated. Our fifth cask is the port pipe. The casks from the port wine industry in Portugal are very closely related to sherry butts. Port pipes also contain 500 liters, but some even up to 650 liters. Compared to sherry butts, port pipes are a bit more compact. Similar to sherry butts, port pipes have landed in the British Isles through the transport of port wine. Our sixth cask is a sherry butt. In the sherry industry, butts comprising as much as 500 liters are very widespread and common. The term butt is derived from the Italian word botte, which means cask. Most sherry butts previously contained Oloroso sherry. However, there are other types of sherry and sherry butts, including Fino, Amontillado, Oloroso, Palacantado, and Pedro Jimenez. In the past, sherry was transported in these casks across the English Channel to the United Kingdom. As with bourbon casks, the Scots took the opportunity to save money by maturing their whiskey in used sherry casks that were already there. Today, sherry is transported in bottles from Jerez, so these casks are usually set aside specifically for aging whiskey. They may be previously a storage container for holding sherry, or they may be specifically seasoned in order to then contain whiskey. The seventh is the puncheon. The puncheon is an Old English unit of measurement after which this type of cask was named at some point. Puncheons are widely used for maturing sherry. Like a butt, a puncheon holds 500 liters, but it is shaped in a slightly different way. It is wider and more compact. Some puncheons are also built bigger than others, or smaller if they are used for the maturation of rum. In whiskey production, however, the most common puncheon is the sherry puncheon, which holds about 500 liters. The following are the three less common cask sizes. Number 8 is the barrique. Barrique is French for cask. Barriques originally came from France and were used to transport wine. Accordingly, most barriques are made of French white oak and are slightly larger than hogsheads. About 225 liters of whiskey can be stored in one barrique. This whiskey naturally absorbs the aromas and flavors of wine from the cask. Number 9 is a cognac cask. Similar to sherry and wine casks, cognac casks were also available in Scotland in sufficient quantities due to imports. The use of cognac casks to mature whiskey is not as common as the use of wine casks. Here and there, however, you can find a whiskey with a finish in a cognac cask. In these casks, there is space for about 300 liters. Our 10th and final cask is the Madeira drum. Madeira is a fortified wine from the Portuguese island of Madeira. The wine ages in casks that have a capacity of 650 liters. These Madeira drums are made of sisal oak. The Arran Quarter Cask Single Malt Scotch Whisky. It's aged in a first fill exit bourbon cask, finished 2 years in quarter cask. It is non-chill filtered, has natural color, it's bottled at 56.2% alcohol by volume, and on average it sells for about $59. So as you saw there, it's coming in at over 50% alcohol by volume. I would say the general character of this whiskey in terms of aromas and flavors is similar to the Barrel Reserve from Arran. However, everything is intensified, everything is turned up a notch, which is exactly what I would have wanted from that whiskey. But in terms of the general character of the aromas and flavors, this is very similar. On the nose, apple pie. So you get apple character, baked apple character with cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, perhaps a little bit of citrus, a little bit of a lemon, cardamom. It smells very fresh. It's very pungent on the nose. The aromas really jump out at you on the palate. The whiskey is youthful, but it doesn't have those characteristics of a whiskey that is too young that I don't like. It doesn't have those weird green notes to it. It doesn't have that new makey character. It doesn't have that sort of fake sugar aspartame aftertaste. I really do not like that in a whiskey. This doesn't have any of that. But it does come across youthful in that it has some sort of sharp edges to it. So you can have a bit of a bite in a whiskey, either due to the ABV level or due to the youth of the whiskey. This has both gone on. The ABV is pumped up and it is a younger whiskey. That little bit of a bite isn't a bad thing. I know that some people want smooth, and that's what people are after. This gives interest to the whiskey. It is similar experience to having a white wine like a Riesling that has real high acidity that comes across as crisp. this whiskey does really, really well on water. It'll take the edges off in terms of the bite off a little bit, but it'll bring out a lot more on the whiskey. Development on this one is okay. It's not real long, it's not hyper complex, but it's really nice. So, big intense flavors of apple pie with those spicy notes, those barrel spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, a little bit of clove, definitely a lot of vanilla. And what lingers is a tingling, spicy, we're talking baking spices, maybe a little bit of white pepper as well, definitely a little bit of white pepper as well, but mostly the baking spices. And the finish on it is medium plus to long. It's got a real nice long finish. For the most part, what you got up front, in the middle, and into the finish is fairly much the same. But what is there, I really, really, really like. I have a couple more Arran bottles that I'm going to be reviewing in this short series on Arran Distillery. But I think out of all of them, this is probably one of the best to get. Non-chill filtered, natural color, over 50% ABV. It's checking the boxes. It doesn't have any offensive, youthful notes that I don't like, and it's really fresh and really, really clean. Personally, I know everybody likes the 10-year-old. The 10-year-old is more orange citrus forward, whereas this is more apple pie, and baking spices forward. So they're really two different whiskeys. But personally, I like this one more than the Arran 10. I really, really like it. What I'm going to give it in terms of a score, I'm going to give it, I'm going to give it 90 points. Point score wise, probably similar to the 10-year-old, but subjectively in terms of the flavors that I prefer in a whiskey, this is checking the boxes. If you prefer more of a citrus, more of an orange forward whiskey, then the 10-year-old is going to be for you. But quality-wise, in terms of the structure of the whiskey, the development of the whiskey, the length of the finish, and all that, I'd say it's on par with the 10-year-old. But subjectively, in terms of the actual aromas and flavors that I get on it, I actually prefer this than over a more orange character dominant on a whiskey. All right. That's it for this review. If you subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much. If you've not yet subscribed, if you like watching my videos, I would ask you to subscribe. Ring the bell to be notified for when I go live or post a new video. And until next time, Sláinte. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.